Once again, welcome back at the memex conference. And before our break, a little recap, we got to hear which insights about you got through the UX online benchmarking. And let's stay with the UX topic for a little bit longer. For our next speaker, it's all about user centricity. And we're very happy to have Kira Süß here with us. Kira has been working in digital product development for 10 years. Apps, websites, voice UX, AI projects, and HMI concepts always had one focus: users. And since 2019, Kira works as product manager and UX strategist for BVG. And it's probably no secret that we've been following various UX projects of the BVG for a while now, and we also like to hear about the results during our previous memex conferences in the last years. And this time, we're very happy to get insights into the current BVG website relaunch and also learn more about the methodological masterpiece behind this project. So please welcome Kira with her talk about the user-centered development of the BVG website.
Ja, hallo. Vielen herzlichen Dank, Nastja. Vielen Dank für die Einladung. Genau, heute geht es um die BVG und die Website-Entwicklung. Und das, was ihr hier gerade seht, ist die Webseite, so wie sie vor kurzem aussah. Und kennt sie vielleicht jemand, der eine oder andere von euch schon mal gesehen? Jedenfalls könnt ihr sie so jedenfalls nicht mehr sehen. Seit Mitte August sieht die Webseite folgendermaßen aus. Es hat ein Jahr gedauert, bis die Seite so aussah. Ganz in der Mitte seht ihr hier das Herzstück unserer Webseite, nämlich die Verbindungssuche. Das ist nämlich der wichtigste Grund, warum Nutzer und Nutzerinnen überhaupt auf unsere Webseite kommen. Nämlich sie wollen herausfinden, wie sie von A nach B kommen. Wie wir dahin gekommen sind, warum die Webseite so aussieht, wie sie aussieht, das zeige ich euch jetzt gleich. Ganz wichtig für uns war es, wenn man jetzt zum Beispiel mal diese Seite anschaut, war es für uns erstmal auszumisten, zu gucken, was brauchen wir eigentlich überhaupt davon, weil die Seite ist recht überladen gewesen, war voll mit Informationen. Man sieht
The website was cluttered, too much information. You can see the navigation bar here at the top where you can look for connection information on the trains. So there was too much information. Why was there too much information on the website? Because we focused too much on solutions. Our stakeholders, for example, from the area of passenger information or ticket prices or the customer dialogue team or customer care team, all these stakeholders, they all had their demands. They all wanted us to implement solutions for them. But it was very important to us to make sure that during this process, we do not so much think in terms of solutions, but to take a step back and describe the problem first. To say, first of all, what's the problem that we try to solve with our website? So we had this product discovery process, as we called it, and that was very important. When I started to work for the BVG, the public transport company, in 2019, I used to work in user experience research. Now that was a premiere, that was new, because we had about 15,000 staff members at the BVG, and I was the only UX researcher. So first of all, I had to explain to my colleagues what I was doing at all. And they didn't come to me and say, Kira, come, let's start a research project. No, I had to take the initiative. I had to look for staff members with whom I could, start research projects. In the beginning, I was told we will only have studies if they are business relevant. But how do you define that? What is business relevant? So I said, let's do research in order to demonstrate to the company as well what UX research can do. So in May last year, we started to work in the so-called product discovery sprints. So we have the website team, and apart from that, we have all the stakeholders. Like I said, the passenger care team or passenger information team. For example, when you have all the signs at the underground stations, exit here, exit over there, they design these signs. That's the passenger information or passenger care team. But as I said, we have lots of different stakeholders in our company, And we wanted to take them on board. And that's why we had the so-called product discovery sprints. Now, product discovery sprints take about 2 weeks, sometimes also a bit longer than that, because sometimes a problem is more complicated. For example, if there is a lift that doesn't work, or if there's a connection that doesn't work, you can't always solve that within just 2 weeks. So what did we do during these 2 weeks? First of all, we analyzed the behavior of our competitors. We also had an internal cooperation with our stakeholders during these 2 weeks. We developed prototypes, tested the prototypes, and then presented the prototypes in a review. So that was the so-called product discovery sprints, and all of that within 2 weeks. And then at the end of these 2 weeks, this was presented to the stakeholders as a review. And one important part of these reviews was to collect feedback. So within the BVG, we made these reviews available to, well, all the stakeholders in the area of marketing or barrier-free access. You know, all the staff members in these different parts of the company were taken on board. They were shown this review in order to keep them up to date, but also in order to collect their feedback. So that is more or less the product discovery process, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But let's take a step back here. Let's talk about the mindset that we were trying to implement. Love the problem, not the solution. Because stakeholders, they came to us and they said something like, just a moment. I definitely need a form with a calendar feature here in this on this page, and then I want a mail to be sent out automatically with event invites. Can you program that for me within 2 weeks? But instead, what they should say is something else. What they should say would be, well, we have this B2B product that is quite hard to explain, and we have to explain it to the stakeholders. Can you help us do that? In other words, what happened was these stakeholders, they came to us and they came with a solution that they wanted to be implemented, even though the problem wasn't clear yet. And that's why we try to love the problem and not the solution. Before we try to find a solution, we try to find out what the shareholder's problem is, what the shareholder wants to achieve for the customer, why he has a problem, why he wants to solve the problem, what is important for the solution, how can we solve the problem, and when will that be done? So that is an important process for my colleague and me, because when we work on a problem, then we have 2 weeks to somehow, well, fix it, to somehow solve it. And the only way to do that is by, well, thinking about the problem first of all, because when you think about a problem, you might find out that it's a bigger problem, problem that has a bigger scope. So first of all, we try to find out what is the problem, how big is the scope of the problem, what kind of concept do we need to solve it. So cooperation with the stakeholders, that was one important part, because on the old website, we had lots of different topics that were mentioned, lots of content. So we took a step back and we said, let's rethink, for example, the topic of services and contact. Let's rethink the topic of ticket prices. And that was the best thing. You really started from the scratch and really started to rethink all these different factors, all these different topics from the very beginning. And that was really a very interesting process. Now, co-creation, as we call it, you don't have to read all the details here on the slide. It's just one example that illustrates how we really put all the factors on the table, all the artifacts that we had found. For example, we had the colleagues from the various different departments who cooperated. We had a look at the things that we currently have on the website that we can use for them. What are the things on our current website that we should not use for them anymore? What are the tracking data we have? Because not everything had been tracked, but the things that we did track, of course, we used that information as well in order to see if the features on the website had been used at all, or if some of the features hadn't even been used. And then we had to prioritize things to find out which aspect is how relevant. So we also cooperated with the colleagues in order to find out what the use cases are, what a potential user flow might look like. And on that basis, we created what we call hypothesis. So it's a hypothesis-based approach. And this is built on the so-called build, measure, learn principle. So in the beginning, we questioned the assumptions that our stakeholders had, because we really wanted to find out which of these hypotheses, which of these assumptions are true and which are not. Build, measure, learn. We did quite a lot of tests, quite a lot of remote research as well. Yes, and we did not only do remote research because of the corona pandemic, but also for mobile studies, qualitative user tests mobile. We had already done that before corona, but then also with the corona pandemic, where we had to implement hygiene measures as well. As you can see here, you can see the screen on the left, and I can see precisely what the participant is doing on the smartphone, how he scrolls, how he swipes. I can follow on the screen, and the camera behind him looks over his shoulders and films the things that he does on his smartphone screen, and I can see that on my screen on the left. So we adhered to we complied with the hygiene rules, and we tried to not just to do remote user experience research, but really on the spot with the people. And the mobile use on the smartphone is very important, because about 2 out of 3 users use our website with their smartphone. Okay, while we were doing our research, we tried to take as many people on board as possible. The entire team was watching. And so yes, we had these observers. I worked using Zoom, so quite a lot of people in the Zoom session, quite a lot of observers. They were all gathered together in this virtual meeting room. Of course, we told the respondents that there were observers, and then we did our research. So it was cooperative, it was interdisciplinary. And normally the stakeholders within the BVG are not really in contact with the users and customers. So that was really a chance for them, for the stakeholders, to really hear the voice of the users. And this gave them the chance to, look at their own work from a different perspective, to understand what users' thoughts are, what users' needs are, what they need from our products. So during the tests, my colleagues, we later on worked with Miro. So what happened was we had these 4 different categories: the things that worked well, the things that worked less well, and the most interesting category was the things that were surprising. That was my favorite category, things that were surprising, and then also unanswered questions and new ideas to try. And all of that was completed by the colleagues while I was doing the interviews. So these were product owners, product managers, UI designers, stakeholders, all of them. They worked with the Miro board, and they attached their posters to the Miro board while we were having the interviews. So quite a lot of insights that were generated in real time, so to speak. And then right after the test, every researcher wants to handle it in a different way. Some of them just want a bit of time to digest everything and to write down everything. Now, what I wanted to do is, I wanted to have a debrief with the colleagues immediately to see what happened, what it was like for us, what the test was like, what struck us, what we found interesting, what was redundant. And, we discussed all of that and wrote all of that down. And then on that basis, we were able to validate the hypothesis. What was very important was the fail early, fail fast approach, because we wanted to make progress as quickly as possible. We wanted to work iteratively, which means during the cooperation, we already collected feedback from the stakeholders. We kept collecting feedback throughout the entire process from our colleagues in order to see which insights and which ideas we can accumulate. So there was this constant exchange with our colleagues. And then, of course, we tested prototypes. And again, after the tests, we had to adapt the insights, the design accordingly. And I can only advise you when you make a design decision or a design change, write down why you do that. Because in a year or in 2 years, somebody's going to ask you, why did you make that change? So it's a good idea to take a note, to write down why you made that change. Like I said, here we have the prototype testing. And in a way, we used a different method here. Because, as you can see, this is an iPhone frame, but we tested it on a desktop. Because with the corona pandemic, it was not always possible for us to, well, be in one and the same room with the respondent, to be with the respondent in the headquarter. So they didn't always come to us. And in that case, we sometimes also had to do that remotely. And then the users used the mouse to scroll. I know that methodologically, this is not really perfect. It's not absolutely the way it should be, but it was the only way for us to do the testing at all. And I have to say that the remote testing really made a great contribution to our research overall. Because with remote testing, we were so much faster and agile. I mean, we had to be very fast anyway, because as I said, we only had this 2-week phase. And during these 2 weeks, we had to do the co-creation, to develop the prototypes and to do the testing as well. So all of that in very little time. And like I said, I know that not everything in the methodology was absolutely perfect, but that was due to the corona pandemic as well. And then, of course, we also validated the user flow for the BVG account, for example. For each and every individual step in the navigation, we validated the user flow. And this validation can take up to 2 weeks. And, you know, we had a new colleague on our team. She came from a startup company. She worked very fast. And the rest of the team worked a bit slower. We said we will only deal with a new topic every 2 weeks. And she found the whole thing a bit slow. But anyway, it was a great experience. We collected so much information, and this really allowed us to validate the user flow. So my UX design colleague and me, we were sitting there while the user was clicking his or her way through the user flow. So I tell the user what the scenario is. The user will then click his or her way through the scenario in order to get where we want the user to go. And then we are sitting there in a Zoom conference. You see, I'm watching the user, my colleague takes notes, the user goes where he wants to go, and he says, well, okay, I found it. And we are sitting there, and we are thinking about it and saying, yes, great. The flow worked well, obviously. And you know these emojis with the party hat and the glasses? You know, we had that on the smartphone as well. We sent that back and forth on the smartphone when it was successful. So that's how product development works at the BVG. We also work with different personas. Maybe you can also find yourselves in these personas. Again, you don't have to read everything that's written here, but these are high-level personas. Ricarda, for example, the commuter. She probably has a subscription, maybe a ticket for the whole year, because she takes the train to go to work on a regular basis. Of course, she's not a corona persona, but like a pre-corona persona, when people still went to work instead of working from home. So she's a commuter. Then we have Christian, the occasional user. Maybe you also know this kind of persona. He's somebody who sometimes buys a monthly ticket, or sometimes in the summer he doesn't buy a ticket because he prefers to use an e-scooter or other means of transport. So that's why he doesn't have a ticket for the whole year, because sometimes there are phases when he doesn't use public transport that much. And then we have Carolina, the working mom. She's a good example for the services and contact team, because she may have a ticket from her company. And maybe she has, because she's a mom, so maybe sometimes she wants to use the lift because she is on her way using the pram. Or maybe her children already go to school and she wants to buy students' tickets for her children, and she doesn't know how to get them. And then we have personas, people who need barrier-free access. And during our discovery process, of course, we were also in contact with our colleagues from the Barrier-Free Access Department. Now, some people who work in that department are also handicapped. And that's why we asked them to review our concept. So as soon as the concepting phase was over, we asked our colleagues from the Barrier-Free Access Department to double check if this is really barrier-free or if we should change anything. So these personas were created on the basis of a cooperation with the University for Communication, the Media and Economics. Now, this was a very interesting cooperation project because we wanted to, well, also hear an external perspective to get some input from the university as well. And here, Optimal Sort, you probably know that. It's a very cool tool, Optimal Sort. We use that in order to define our navigation structure. Here at the bottom, this dendrogram at the bottom. So there are various different ways to analyze this. And you can use Optimal Sort qualitatively and quantitatively as well. So we did card sorting in order to analyze our structures, but we also used it quantitatively with the help of a quantitative online survey. So we did both quantitative and qualitative work. And that's why the website now looks the way it does. Here we have the connections, find connection. That's the first item on the list at the top. Each of these tabs went through an evaluation process. It's based on the card sorting, and here again the design, why the website looks the way it does, why it's quite light and not dark. This was first of all the result of unmoderated remote user tests, but also the result of online surveys where we wanted to see if this color scheme and this bright light character of the website really corresponds to the brand. And when you do an online survey on the BVG website, you also have to make sure that that it's not the BVG staff members who fill in the forms, because sometimes, you know, in the open questions where you can type an answer, sometimes the answers included a terminology that only BVG staff members know. And of course, the BVG stakeholders, they are also important, but no more important than our customers. So to sum this up, the discovery sprints led us to the place where we are now. Our developers had the advantage that everything they developed was tested. Every digital code we developed was tested. And then we asked our stakeholders to love the problem and not the solution. That's important not only for middle managers, but also for ourselves. It was very difficult. You know, there's always this challenge. You're always tempted to think about the solution, but you have to think about the problem first. And then co-creation with stakeholders. This was super important because within the BVG, there are so many ideas from all the different stakeholders. So it's important to put them all on the table and to validate them. And then, of course, feasibility also had to be examined. So quite early in the project phase, of course, we also wanted to validate the feasibility. And then, like I said, we also took the Barrier-Free Access Department on board. And then the reviews that I already talked about, all those things that we developed, all the concepts we developed were made available to a broad range of different stakeholders in order to get feedback as early as possible. We didn't want anybody to criticize things, much later. And that's why we wanted to take the stakeholders on board very early. We invited them very early to provide their feedback. We told the stakeholders that the review is available. In a way, the review is like a catwalk where you show all the things that you have developed during this 2-week phase. And then, like I said, we tidied up the old version of the website. We threw out all the things that were not necessary. Less is more. That was our approach. Then we applied the lean startup approach to validate hypotheses. And we used a combination of qualitative and quantitative UX test. So that was the mix of different methods that we applied in order to turn the website into the website that it is today. Now here's our team, the colleagues that I cooperated with on this project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ja, ganz lieben Dank.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Und wie immer natürlich die Frage an euch. Wo gibt es Fragen? Bei Julia gibt es eine Frage.
So, any questions from the audience? I think there's one over there.
Dann bleiben wir jetzt auch auf Deutsch, oder? Für die Fragen.
Yes, shall we continue to speak German?
Ja,
Okay.
mich würde interessieren, zwischen dem Research-Teil, und du hast ja gesagt, ihr habt die Entwickler ganz früh mit eingebunden, ne? Aber diese Neuentwürfe, sind die tatsächlich dann auch immer in diesen zweiwöchigen Sprint entstanden? Also hattet ihr auch UX-Designer mit ein?
Yes, and you also had UX designers in your team. Yes, exactly. My colleague and me, we were in contact all the time, and we kept working on the concepts during these 2 weeks. So that's what happened. You had 2 weeks, and you had regular team meetings. And then, of course, you have your jour fixe appointments as well. But in addition to that, we developed these concepts together. And as a researcher, and as the one who was responsible for product discovery, I had to have a look at the deadline. Now, the deadline, that's the review, so to speak. It's the launch. And by then, we had to complete the work. And that was really quite tough. There was another question over there. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. One question that I had was, you said you started on your own, so to speak. You were the only UX researcher within the company. And now you've talked about a program where you took lots and lots of stakeholders on board. How did you inspire them? How did you motivate all these stakeholders to spend so much time during this 2-week phase to have a look at the interviews, to have a look at the catwalk, as you called it? Well, I have to admit, I was surprised as well, but they wanted it. They were really interested. They were really motivated. They wanted to be part of it. I think we are the only team within the BVG that works in an agile way. And it is also quite rare for a researcher like me to work within such a kind of team. Because normally you have developers front end and back end and so on, but I wanted to be there all the time. Now, coming back to your question, how did we motivate the stakeholders? We didn't have to motivate them. They wanted this. They wanted their ideas to be taken into consideration. They wanted to see what we were doing. They wanted to see what agile work means. And they also wanted to understand, well, just how we work. And yes, of course, when you have colleagues from a specialized department, the colleagues may be a bit older or a bit younger. And you can say that currently there's a change of generations within the BVG. We still have our older staff members at the BVG, and they're important because they have a lot of expertise. But there are also younger staff members joining us, and they say we have to bring the BVG into the next century now. So there were some colleagues with whom I cooperated more because they have this digital DNA. They understand that this kind of research is very important. Of course, stakeholders, they have their requests and they find their own requests very important, but there were these younger colleagues who have the digital DNA within themselves and they really wanted to focus on the user's needs. So there were some colleagues who really understood better than others what product development means. Any further questions?
Dann sind wir mit der Fragerunde tatsächlich.
Okay, that's obviously not the case.
Ja, ganz lieben Dank.
So, I say thank you very much.